Welcome back everyone, it's Charlie. This will be my full breakdown and Easter eggs references video for Masters of the Universe. There's a lot that they packed into this movie. It references virtually every incarnation of Masters of the Universe, all the different versions of the cartoons, the original mini-comics, the newspaper strips, as well as She-Ra Princess of Power versions. Just because it was the first movie, there were a lot of hidden characters of people they didn't get to, but some of them they did feature in those post-credit scenes. There have been at least 5 different attempts at a live-action Masters of the Universe reboot movie since the original Dolph Lundgren version, who also has a cameo in this movie as a mysterious weightlifter. During interviews, he also said that he hopes that he can return as King Grayskull at some point in a future movie. We'll see about that. This movie was directed by Travis Knight, who you probably remember from the Bumblebee movie. In that movie, he was basically doing the same thing he's doing in this movie, rebooting a long-running live-action movie that was also a cartoon and also a toy line. He picked up the project from David Goyer, the person who wrote the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy movies and some Zack Snyder-era DC movies. His version of the Masters of the Universe live-action movie was going to be a little bit more in the tone of Zack Snyder, like very dark, very gritty He-Man, very lore-heavy. Mattel wound up passing on that eventually in favor of this current version after the success of the Barbie movie, so the Masters of the Universe movie owes a lot to the success of Barbie at Mattel as a movie. They even released a doll, like not an action figure, but an actual doll of He-Man, kind of like the Barbie dolls. Just like the Barbie movie, this movie leans heavily into the camp and the fact he was a toy line and the original cartoon. At the beginning of the movie, the new Eternia theme song plays over the opening. Daniel Pemberton did the full soundtrack, but this particular song got Brian May from Queen to guest star playing the guitar track. They actually said part of the reason for that was because the music for the movie was largely inspired by the soundtrack for Flash Gordon. The movie is very Flash Gordon in tone, which was done by Queen back in the day. So that's why the whole soundtrack has vibes of Queen and Freddie Mercury, but they also literally got one of the former members of Queen to do one of the tracks. Later in the movie, they also literally use Queen's Princes of the Universe theme song from the Highlander movie, and the police also call Adam Highlander during the movie, so the Highlander franchise is now canon to the universe of Masters of the Universe. They are currently also in the middle of filming a live-action Highlander reboot movie with Henry Cavill, another example of what they're doing with Masters of the Universe, rebooting a long-running giant franchise. This new movie is intended to be a full-on reboot, borrowing from the lore of every version of Masters of the Universe, all the cartoons, including the She-Ra cartoons, the original mini-comics, the newspaper strips back in the day, that was a big deep cut during the movie, and the original 1987 movie. There are a couple references to that. Next big Easter egg is a good one because they put Cringer in the middle of the MGM logo instead of the usual one. Just felt like a no-brainer. We then see the planet Eternia. Adam explains his backstory, basic framework of the lore, to his date. It sounds like he does this on the regular to all the dates he goes out with. Eternia is a planet that exists in the center of the universe at the nexus of power, is created by the 3 primordial deities. Zor, the bird god, who's the primary deity that Adam and the sorceress worship, Ka, the snake god, also worshipped by the snake men. They also worship Serpos, another lesser snake god whose body also forms Snake Mountain literally. That's why it's an actual giant snake, it's just the frozen body of a snake. And Havoc, the god of chaos. Skeletor wields the Havoc staff, so its magical energy is a portion of Havoc's power. It's also what melted his face off when he started using the staff, so technically Havoc melted Skeletor's face off. The actual staff was given to him by Hordak. We'll talk more about Hordak later in the video when we get to that part of the movie.
What do you mean, Shadow Weaver?
These 3 primordial deities create Eternia as the nexus of the celestial power, the power itself, basically the power of the entire universe. So all magic in the universe also flows from Eternia. So if Eternia, the planet, dies, then the rest of the universe dies with it. This is also the reason why He-Man is so powerful. He wields the power of an entire universe, essentially. It's like somebody wielding the Infinity Gauntlet. During the first flyby, we see a dragon here. This one doesn't look like Granomir, he's not the right color, but this does mean that Granomir exists inside this universe. We see Eternos, the capital city of Eternia, Castle Grayskull. Castle Grayskull was created by King Grayskull, the first champion to wield the power. He partnered with the first sorceress who was his wife. This was basically his castle, and it was constructed to protect the power. Like, this was the beginning of everything. And the reason why it has a giant skull on it, it's not the skull of any particular creature. They just made it to look scary to try and scare off anybody that would try to break in. During the Celestial montage here, the figure with the hammer is King Grayskull forging the power sword. The metal that he used to actually wield the sword was actually given to him by Scareglow in Subternia, who I think we're probably going to see in the next movie because Skeletor's soul went to Subternia after Adam killed him. He wields it, calling the power, fights a number of ancient villains from the lore. I think we see a combination of Snake Men here, the Horde. We'll definitely see the Horde in the next movie because of She-Ra and the shot of the Fright Zone of Etheria in the post-credit scene. Maybe we'll also see some of the Snake Men in the sequel too. Then we see the Sorceress, played by Morena Baccarin. Her white look is mostly to reference the 1987 Masters of the Universe Sorceress. They don't really get into it in this movie that much, but she is Teela's biological mother. There have been various versions of the shows where Man-at-Arms was also just her adoptive father, and some where he was her biological father. We'll see how they explain it in this movie franchise. Teela's eventual destiny is to become the next sorceress after her mother and be Adam's partner guarding the power. My assumption is they won't get into that unless they make it to like a full trilogy of movies. Maybe by the end of the second movie, the sorceress will reveal to her that she is her mother and why she kept the secret from her whole life. This is mostly because the sorceress views being the sorceress is an actual curse because she is trapped in Grayskull. She couldn't be a mother to Teela, and Teela will eventually, she thinks, be trapped in Grayskull, so she doesn't want to burden her with this when she was a little girl. There are a couple times where you see Teela pick up the power sword and carry it for Adam throughout the movie. You could look at it as like a sly wink at that, like she will eventually help Adam protect the power, but in a slightly different way by becoming the sorceress and wielding the power that way. When the camera pans out showing the statues of former champions and kings of Eternia, I believe the one hoisting the sword above him is King Grayskull. You can let me know if you think it looks kind of like Dolph Lundgren at all. Like, are they planning to bring him back as a version of Grayskull? We'll see. Then we meet his mother, Queen Marlena. She's an astronaut from NASA on Earth who crash-landed on Eternia, got married to Randor, then gives birth to Adam and his twin sister, Adora. In the background behind them, zoom and enhance, you can see her astronaut helmet. They never really get into it, but you need like 3 master's degrees and a PhD to become an astronaut, so she's probably like one of the smartest engineers on the planet next to Man-at-Arms. Man-at-Arms is the guy who creates like all the really cool tech, the weapons, devices, so he's technically the best engineer on the planet. This is also how he creates the new body for Roboto at the end of the movie, like that's how smart he is. We see a tiny baby version of Cringer. They did a baby Grogu version of Cringer. Gotta sell those toys, like we want as many versions of Cringer as we can sell. The funny thing about Cringer is that he wasn't originally part of the toy line when it launched in 1982. That was just Battle Cat. That was like the first thing that they sold with He-Man action figures. Later, when DC Comics did a Masters of the Universe comic book, they introduced the alter ego for Battle Cat, who was Cringer.
Oh, I hope Adam's not gonna do what I think he's gonna do.
When they pass by the winged horses on the steps, that also feels like a She-Ra, Princess of Power reference. We meet Man-at-Arms, played by Idris Elba. His suit is accurate to the original toy line and cartoons. Most of the major characters get a couple of costumes throughout the movie, all of them being different versions of ones they wore in various incarnations, but by the end, more accurate to the original cartoon. Man-at-Arms is basically like the captain of the Royal Guard. The Royal Guard also contain all the other heroes from the cartoons and the toy line. Not all of them from the toy line are featured in this movie, but they do hint at some of the background. There's some Easter eggs, and I think they're just saving some characters for the sequels. Like, there are many, many characters from different waves of different toy lines. I think they play Adam here as being kind of scrawny and a weakling when he was younger, as more of a callback to the way Adam in the cartoons tried to disguise the fact that he was He-Man by being more of a fool. The Netflix Masters of the Universe did this by showing Adam being way less swole without the power, so that there was more of a disparity between his transformations. Travis Knight also said that he wanted to have a bigger distinction between Adam and He-Man. After he calls the power later, you visibly see his muscles grow a lot. We meet young Teela. She's a couple years older than Adam, which is why she's giant next to him. Him trying to talk no jutsu his way out of fighting her in the yard is also to set up the whole subplot of him being the understanding version of He-Man who doesn't like to fight and even tries to give Skeletor a chance to become good later. It's also why he goes into human resources specifically later on Earth. We meet his father, King Randor, played by James Purefoy. He's barely in this movie at all, and they do confirm that he dies later, so Marlena will just rule as queen by herself for the foreseeable future. When he walks away in the background too, the helmet on the statue looks a little bit like Man-at-Arm's helmet from the 1987 Masters of the Universe movie. Skeletor's forces attack, and we've got a ton of Rotons, Collectors. They even have ships that are inspired by the starship Eternia from the New Adventures of He-Man, and Fright Flyers. Pretty much everything here in this part of the movie you could buy as a toy. Skeletor's minions are called the Evil Warriors in the original toy line. We get some of those, not every single one from the original toy line, and some mixture of the ones from the 1987 movie too. They're calling these people Skelenites. There's Triclops, Spycore, Karg, who was in the original 1987 movie, Beastman, and Goatman. Goatman wasn't from the original cartoon. He debuted in the 1985 Masters of the Universe story Secret of the Dragon's Egg. So this is also one of the examples of how they're pulling from all over the Masters of the Universe canon, not just the toy lines or the cartoons, but also some of the stories, the original mini-comics, and even the news strips. Then we meet some of the heroes. They only have a couple of them in this movie. There's Ram Man, Mechanic, Fisto. They also introduced the bit later that they were all named in this universe by Adam when he was 10 years old, so these aren't their proper names, but they were their names during the original toy line. Man-at-Arms then loses a fight against Trapjaw, and when the sorceress teleports Adam to Earth with the sword, I think that's a reference to the Cosmic Key from the 1987 movie because it was all about them portaling back to Earth. We also learn in this movie that they've since developed jump drives by present day that allow them to open wormholes across space, kind of like Thor in the Bifrost. This movie is also tonally very much like Thor Ragnarok, and they borrow a lot of the plot from Thor Ragnarok with the hammer breaking and the twist of Thor's power in Adam's storyline, where Thor never needed the hammer, he always had the power, just like Adam never needed the sword, the power was always inside him. Then we meet Skeletor, played by Jared Leto. They said that Jared Leto was on set every day with motion capture dots, and they just put the skeleton face on him with visual effects later.
That's it. I finished.
Of course, my lord.
When I raise my fist like that, I'm done.
All of his jokes, his whole performance leaning into camp was meant to be in the tone of the original cartoon series and Alan Oppenheimer's version of the character. He has a couple good cackles in this movie. They don't really get into the Keldor lore for his backstory in this movie, but he is Randor's half-brother. We'll see if they do that in future movies. Hordak wiped Skeletor's mind when he gave him the Havoc Staff, so Skeletor doesn't know that he's Randor's brother, and Randor also doesn't know that Skeletor is his brother Keldor. He remembers Keldor, but because he has the skeleton face, he doesn't look like his brother. You could look at him putting the crown on his head as a reference to this. He's Randor's older brother, making him technically the rightful king of Eternia. He's also from the blue-skinned Gar race that lives on Eternia. We'll see if we get more of them in the sequel too. Then we meet Evil Lyn, played by Alison Brie. When he raises his fist on the ground next to him, you can also see an Easter egg for Merman. Like I said, we also see him in the background of a post-credit scene with Orko, just standing around the marketplace at Eternos, so maybe more Merman in the sequel too. When young Adam holds up the power sword for the first time, the power crackles through him just a little bit, and when Marlena says, "Never forget where you came from," this also feels like a She-Ra reference. Adora was stolen by Hordak as a baby and forgot who she really was, where she came from, until the events of the post-credit scene when she gets the Sword of Protection and stops calling herself Force Captain Adora. Up to this point, since she was a baby, she actually thought that Hordak was her father. Presumably, the sorceress helped fill her in on some of the backstory and the truth about her past. Adam loses the sword mid-flight to Earth and it lands somewhere else in America, and he lands in Oklahoma City. Presumably, he was raised in foster care there because he says he's always been from Oklahoma City. And I think part of the joke with the sword is that somebody working at Mattel in this universe, maybe Mark Taylor himself, found the sword and it inspired him to create the Torak character that they then turned into a toy line, because the Torak character was based on Mark Taylor's original idea for like this new franchise that he was going to create that then got turned into He-Man and Masters of the Universe eventually. So it sounds like in this universe, that Mark Taylor at that version of Mattel just wound up running with that idea, like Mattel made that Torak line. Part of the idea with the creation of the He-Man character at Mattel back in the late 70s, early 80s is that they wanted to do a line of Conan toys, but they couldn't get the IP because of the big success of Arnold Schwarzenegger's version of Conan. So Mark Taylor came up with Torak in this barbarian-looking design, but it was too much like Conan, and they didn't want to have legal problems, so he wound up changing that into what became the first version of He-Man. When he goes back to his apartment, his roommate is watching The Notebook. I don't know why they use this movie specifically in this, but we got all kinds of pop culture posters around their house. There's a Zelda poster. There's a lot of other pop culture items that have nothing to do with Masters of the Universe in the toy store later in the movie too. When he goes into his room, there's a drawing of Ram Man, and all the drawings of toys and characters are meant to have been his when he was younger. Some of them seem like they're inspired by Mark Taylor's original concept art, and a lot of the drawings are really just versions of swords in the Power Sword. Some of these in the background are a little too blurry to make out, but if you can pick out some more, just write them below in the comments. The whole reason why Adora is not in his childhood drawing of their family is because he doesn't know that she exists. His parents never told him about Hordak stealing her when they were babies to spare him the pain of losing her. Back in the day during the original cartoon, She-Ra was also retconned into his backstory because they didn't create her till later, and it was in partnership with Filmation. Like, hey, we want to create a TV series for little girls, let's create the She-Ra character, now we have to write her into Adam's backstory. He winds up learning about her for the first time during the Secret of the Sword movie. Him driving the old beat-up yellow car felt like a Travis Knight Bumblebee callback, although it would have been way cooler if he had Adam drive an actual classic yellow Camaro. I'm gonna guess that Mattel and Hasbro couldn't work out a deal on that, so like no Camaro in this movie. None of the Earth office characters are from the comics, but they do say the words, "I have the power," and they use this for like the meta payoff at the end of the movie where Skeletor's inside his mind inside this office.
It's not a good look for human resources.
The whole he-him pronouns joke is just meant to be a reference to the He-Man name because his name is a literal pronoun, which they also make fun of at the end of the movie, and canonically now, this Adam gave himself the name He-Man when he was 10 years old. Then at the gym, we get our big Dolph Lundgren cameo. His dialogue is also a joke on the reboot of He-Man in the live-action movies. He says, "You took my spot because he was the He-Man before this. Advice for the new guy? No, you get nothing. Like, that's it. That's all you get." And he says, "Good journey," and gives him the sign that they were giving during that 1987 movie. Then he goes to the toy store to find the sword, and it's called the Fright Zone, a She-Ra Hordak reference, and the skull is a Skeletor reference. So, like, they're foreshadowing a lot of things here. All these blonde wigs and some bobs also feel like He-Man references. Nicholas did wear a blonde bob wig to do the What's Going On meme for the actual press tour, but not for the actual movie. On the shelf of comics next to them is a Reign of Superman blue cover variant. I actually collected this back in the day, like I just did the meme in the audience, like, I remember that. The Death and Return of Superman is actually the first run that I followed in the comics. Before that, all I'd ever read were like Spider-Man comics. A lot of the toys and items in this shop are from different sources, but most of them, like most of the big ones that the camera focuses on, are Mattel toys from some classic era. First big one here is the Big Jim action figure, which was a failed toy line that Mattel did right before Masters of the Universe, and the Big Jim toys and playsets and vehicles in the Tiger are here too. The Big Jim Tiger is also a huge Easter egg for Cringer in Battle Cat. Mattel reused their Big Jim cat toys that they didn't sell, repainted them, added some armor to make them Battle Cats. A lot of times, toy manufacturers will do this if they have a lot of unsold inventory from like one particular toy line. They'll just repurpose it and turn it into something new from another toy line. All the astronauts here are Major Matt Mason, another classic Mattel toy, way before my time, but some of you watching this video might be old enough to have collected these back in the day, or like the Big Jim toys. The anime mecha also feels like a deep-cut Voltron reference to the Japanese anime that inspired it, but I can't remember specifically. Mattel, coincidentally, also did the toys for Voltron, and the Amazon Studios that made this Masters of the Universe movie also made a live-action Voltron movie they're releasing next year with Henry Cavill. So brace yourselves for all kinds of classic Voltron nostalgia next year. As the camera spins around on Torak here, more on him in a second, in the background you can see some classic X-Men 90s action figures, a bunch of other ones from the Rocky movie. There's even a Yoda figure in the glass case too. But we get a bunch of Torak Easter eggs. Like I said, he was Mark Taylor's original creation that eventually turned into the He-Man design for Masters of the Universe. So the idea in this universe is that Mattel just went with the Torak idea and that became the toy line, not Masters of the Universe. But it was inspired by the real Power Sword from real Masters of the Universe because in this universe, those characters are all real. Really good example of that, like on the poster here, it says Sword Power, a play on the Power Sword. Then the police arrest him the next day, and on the freeway, Four Non-Blondes' What's Up song starts playing, and he literally says, "What's going on?" as the reference to the meme. They actually did the meme a couple times for the press tour. Beastman attacks because the minute Adam touched the sword yesterday, it set off a magical beacon that Evil Lyn and Skeletor detected, and the Sorceress and the heroes who sent Teela also to get him, along with Beastman to get him. We meet Camila Mendes, adult version of Teela, and the costume she's wearing is a combination of a couple of Teela's outfits from the cartoons from various points, and later winds up wearing a more comic book accurate version. They fly off in a Talon fighter from the original toy line, which has an AI personality. Like I said, pretty much every vehicle in this movie was part of the toy line, all the playsets, all the characters too, for the most part. 15 years have gone by since the beginning of the movie, and Skeletor has since been using the survivors on Eternos as slave labor and basically kept the king and queen locked up in Snake Mountain in their dungeon. Waiting for Adam to touch the sword so they could find out where he was. It was one of the reasons why Skeletor was lying in stasis on that special pedestal, like semi-hibernation, just waiting for signs of Adam in the power sword before he actually did anything, because that's all he really cared about. Then we meet Pighead. He wakes up Skeletor, and as he walks to the throne, he passes by a bunch of skeletons of creatures. I couldn't quite tell which ones they belong to. You can let me know in the comments if you think you do. I already explained the origin of Snake Mountain. It previously belonged to the Snake Men who worshipped Serpos, who was frozen, and like his giant head is Snake Mountain that they just live in. The reason why you don't see any Snake Men in this movie for the most part, I think there may be some drawings of them in the background, but you don't actually physically see them running around, is mostly because they were much stronger in the distant past of Eternia, and they've since been killed off for the most part. Not entirely, but mostly. There are a couple moments where it seems like Evil Lyn gets a little cozy with Skeletor here, but she mostly serves him out of fear, and her real goal is to usurp him and take his power for herself. That's all she really cares about. Then we meet the rest of the Royal Guard heroes, including Moss Man, and the woman is Dion. She's actually a super deep cut for the original newspaper comic strips that were published in the mid-80s, probably like the biggest deep cut of the movie. There are a couple big deep cuts in the movie too. When Adam says he saw Fisto fighting goblins in the past, I believe that's meant to be a callback to the classic cartoon. Then we meet the next new character, Roboto. In this movie universe, she was created by Man-at-Arms as a war droid, then modified to do housekeeping. She's voiced by Kirsten Wiig. I was really surprised by that. And later in the movie, also gets a more cartoon and toy-accurate appearance with the clear chest plate. Then we get our big scene of Adam calling the power for the first time and transforming into He-Man while he fights Trapjaw. He makes a joke, too, about where his clothes go after he transforms. He's not sure if they come back, which they do eventually. The words he says are the same words that they said in the original cartoon in the toy line, "By the power of Grayskull, I have the power." If you zoom and enhance on the runes around his breastplate, it reads, "Whosoever unlocks the secret of Grayskull unlocks the secret of the universe." So it feels like a reference to Thor, let he who's worthy wield the power of Thor kind of thing. When they're being chased, he flies a sky sled, which is also from the toy line in the classic cartoon. Pretty much all the characters on Eternia, the vehicles, were part of original Toys R cartoons that you can now buy on eBay, or Mattel also sometimes sells new versions of them randomly. They're also selling movie-accurate versions of all these toys and vehicles now, too. When Skeletor kills Moss Man, you could look at this as a callback to the Netflix Masters of the Universe more recently, where he basically does the same thing. Adam has his next vision of the sorceress, who appears to him in her bird form. It's the only way that she can leave Castle Grayskull is in bird form. I think the reason why she doesn't give him clear instructions throughout the movie entirely is mostly to help him learn how to be the champion and wield the power on his own. There's a little bit of teasing of Adam and Teela's romance. They only ever actually got together later in their timeline during the Netflix Masters of the Universe series. Their previous cartoons just hinted at their relationship. Skeletor also has done this projection trick many times before, but this particular one feels mostly like a callback to the 1987 movie. We get another shot of the sorceress in bird form flying to Snake Mountain with them. As they approach, Adam also says the dialogue from the intro of the original cartoon, "I am Adam, Prince of Eternia, defender of the secrets of Castle Grayskull."
Prince of Eternia, defender of the secrets of Castle Grayskull.
During his big fight scene here with the evil warriors, you see him wield more and more of the power. Throughout the movie, he progressively uses more of it, and we see him shoot a bolt of lightning out of the sword. Ironically, this is also what it looks like when he transforms Cringer into Battle Cat. His most powerful moment in the movie is destroying the Havoc Staff with his bare hands using the power. The only problem here is that he is weak to magic, which is why Evil Lynn can freeze him, but he is able to eventually break free of her magical trap. When they throw him in the dungeon, we meet adult Cringer and his mother is back. She and his father were kept here for the last 15 years. When Skeletor flies back to Castle Grayskull, they're flying in the Collector ship, which is also a big thing in the classic toy line. Adam and the others break out of prison and they play queens, princes of the universe from Highlander, mostly for a joke here, but it is also paying off the Highlander joke from earlier in the movie. When they fly back to Grayskull, the ship that Adam and the others are on is based on the starship Eternia from the New Adventures of He-Man. We get a really big Battle Cat joke when Cringer jokes about wearing armor, saying next time he's going to wear armor, and Adam literally calls him a Battle Cat. The only bummer of this movie with Cringer is that we don't get to see Adam actually transform him to Battle Cat, we just see him after he's become Battle Cat. Then the whole reason why Skeletor has not been able to call the power using the sword is because the sword was never the source of power, it was Adam himself. The power was always inside him. Like I said, Thor Ragnarok, Thor was not the god of hammers, the power of gods was always inside of him. But he winds up shattering the power sword with the Havoc staff, and then they get super meta when he goes into Adam's memories just to mess with him. And this whole sequence got a lot of laughs in my theater. First in the gym, when he says Beefcake Barbarian, this is also a deep cut reference to his original backstory. Originally, He-Man was supposed to be from a barbarian tribe, and you could think of it also as a Conan reference, since Conan the Barbarian was the main inspiration for this character. Then they go on the date again, then the human resources, and you notice Skeletor is wearing an ID badge with his picture on it. Skeletor also impales him with the sword, almost killing him, pushing him into his final vision of his Earth apartment. Then I think the reason why his friend puts the picture that he drew of the sorceress on his chest specifically is because the sorceress herself is controlling the vision at this point to give him the pep talk, and it's why she can appear to him in human form because it is a vision. She's not outside of Castle Grayskull. You also notice in his room on the wall there's a NASA space shuttle. That's also a sly reference to his mother being a NASA astronaut. He then uses the power to heal his wound and reform the sword, which I don't think we've seen a lot of in the previous cartoons, like him actually using the power to heal his major wounds. He tries to talk no jutsu Skeletor, who declines, and when he says he loves being a villain, like that real funny moment here, it's also kind of a callback to the classic series where Skeletor did something similar, saying he doesn't want to be good, he wants to be evil. Then they get really anime with his beatdown during this last part where he just lays into Skeletor, destroys the Havoc staff with the power, and the resulting explosion kills Skeletor. He's not really permadead though, because in Eternia when you die, your soul either goes to Subternia or Preternia, so Skeletor is just chilling out with Scareglow now in Subternia. The only bummer here with his death scene is that his last words weren't, "Until next time." We get a time jump of 6 months. They've largely rebuilt Eternos from Skeletor's damage. The sorceress does another flyby in bird form. His mother Marlena is ruling again as queen by herself now because his father is dead. And everybody has way more cartoon accurate costumes, including Roboto. They do that weird laugh that goes on for way too long as a reference to the classic Filmation cartoon, and they do the bit with him giving himself the He-Man name, clowning on that. They also reveal he brought his friend to Eternia to prove that it's real. Presumably, he took him home right after this, after he was helping the Avionians. The distress call from the Avion village is a reference to Stratos. I think we'll see him in the next movie.
Now, to begin the festival.
When he runs off to change in secret and change Cringer to Battle Cat, it also feels like a reference to the classic series. In the original series, nobody but like a few of his closest friends knew his secret, but in the movie, pretty much everybody knows that Adam is He-Man. You could also look at this as a joke that he technically gets naked every time he transforms, and he doesn't want everybody to see him naked all the time. While this is happening, they also play a little bit of the classic Masters of the Universe theme music, and we get our final shot of He-Man and Battle Cat. During the first big mid-credit scene, we get Orko, which is a reference to the PSAs from the classic cartoon, which one of the characters would shout out the moral message of the episode, recap the plot. Orko also flies in hat first, then appears magically out of his hat, just like the cartoon. He wasn't from the original toy line. He debuted on the cartoon series first, then they started eventually selling toys of him. In the background of his scene too, you can also see Merman just standing around in the marketplace talking to people, so maybe more Merman in the next movie. When the rest of the credits play, they have all the characters in graphics depicting Orko in a roster with them, along with Gwildor from the 1987 movie, canonizing him to this movie universe. So I think this is also confirmation that Orko had joined the team at some point in that 6-month time jump. Maybe Gwildor too, we'll see about that. During the big She-Ra post-credit scene, this is the one everyone was going crazy about in the theater. She's on Eternia, calling the power with the Sword of Protection for the first time, so I think what they're saying here is the sorceress somehow got her the sword before this, and she's becoming She-Ra for the first time about 6 months after Adam becomes He-Man for the first time. She's looking at the Fright Zone, so Hordak will be the main villain of the sequel. He's Skeletor's master and rules the Horde. Hordak also wants the power and was secretly using Skeletor to get it for him. When she transforms, they also play some of her theme music from the original cartoon, so I'm assuming the plot of the sequel will be a little bit of the Secret of the Sword, even though they've sped run some of that already, with changes in Hordak trying to take the power from them, and a big team-up finale with the two of them by the end. Originally, Adam took her the Sword of Protection during the Secret of the Sword crossover movie, and that's when she became She-Ra for the first time. We will see how they meet for the first time during the actual movie, whatever the sequel winds up being, if they meet as He-Man and She-Ra for the first time, or they meet as Adora and Adam for the first time. But even though she has the Sword of Protection, I don't think that she knows that Adam is her brother, and Adam still doesn't know that Adora is his sister, so I think when they meet for the first time, they won't know that they're related. The actress playing She-Ra in the scene actually posted her scene online and explained what she was doing. She's a model, so I don't think that she's meant to be like the permanent version of She-Ra in the actual sequel. Travis Knight also said that he already has an actress in mind to play her if they do a sequel. So you can let me know in the comments who you want to play She-Ra in the next movie. During the final post-credit scene, Evelyn is still inside Castle Grayskull after everyone's left, picks up Skeletor's skull, and takes it from Grayskull back to Snake Mountain saying, "You've looked better, my lord," and you hear Skeletor's cackle in the background. I'm just assuming logically that she did this right after they walked out of Grayskull, so this is 6 months before the other part of the end of the movie. So like this happened a while ago, and she's been in Snake Mountain with the skull for a while, ruling over Snake Mountain in his absence. Because his soul is in Subternia, either she's going to try and resurrect him with some help, or they'll just leave him in Subternia for a while, or that'll be part of some other subplot. We will see, but it just seems like he will eventually be back, and I wouldn't be surprised if they also have him betray Hordak and help He-Man and She-Ra defeat him at some point. Like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and really Hordak is the big main villain of the entire Masters of the Universe lore. So there's a whole lot happening during the movie. I tried to hit up all like the real biggest references to all the lore and all the different incarnations. What'll probably wind up happening if this movie doesn't do well enough, Amazon will eventually do a sequel in a couple years, but it'll just be straight to streaming because they just did the live-action Voltron movie with Henry Cavill. That's already going straight to streaming. They're not even going to put it in theaters, so they would probably just do the same for Masters of the Universe eventually. Probably going to be at least 3 years minimum before we see that sequel, even if the movie does do well. Everybody post all your reactions in the comments below and let me know what you want them to do with the sequel movies and characters like She-Ra. I've already done that much longer video for the post-credit scene, so I'll link it at the end of this, but if you have any other special requests for bonus videos or Easter eggs or questions about what's happening with She-Ra in the future or the sequel, just write them in the comments below. Everybody click here for that, and click here for all my other Masters of the Universe videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.